Story 1. The Haunting of Mercywood Hospital. In the heart of a small, decaying town named Mercyville, there stood an ominous building that cast a shadow over the entire community, Mercywood Hospital. Once a place of healing and hope, it had long been abandoned, left to decay and crumble under the weight of its dark history. The hospital's origins were shrouded in mystery. Some said it was built on ancient burial grounds, while others whispered about experiments gone awry in its underground laboratories. Regardless of the truth, one thing was certain. Mercywood was a place that held secrets, and those secrets were not meant to be unearthed. It was a moonless night when 4 adventurous teenagers gathered around a flickering campfire. Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa had grown up hearing tales of Mercywood Hospital's haunted past. On this particular night, fueled by bravado and teenage curiosity, they made a pact to explore the abandoned hospital. Armed with flashlights, the quartet approached the decaying building. Its windows were shattered, and the once white walls were now stained with the passage of time. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper into the hospital's dark corridors. As the group delved further into the hospital's labyrinthine halls, they began to hear faint whispers. At first, they dismissed it as their imagination running wild, but the voices grew louder and more distinct. It was as though the very walls of Mercywood were speaking to them, recounting tales of suffering and despair. The whispers led them to a room at the end of a dimly lit hallway. Inside, they discovered a journal, its pages filled with the rantings of a former patient. The words spoke of experiments, pain, and a presence that lurked in the shadows. It was a story of torment and madness. As the teenagers continued their exploration, they felt an eerie presence that seemed to follow them, unseen yet undeniably present. It whispered their names, and their flashlights flickered in response. Panic set in, but they couldn't find their way back through the labyrinth of hallways that seemed to shift and change around them. The haunting intensified as the night wore on. The group encountered ghostly apparitions of long-deceased doctors and nurses, their eyes filled with sorrow and regret. Shadows danced on the walls, and disembodied voices echoed through the empty corridors. In the depths of Mercywood Hospital, the teenagers stumbled upon a hidden chamber. Within its walls, they found a collection of preserved organs, jars filled with grotesque specimens, and chilling medical instruments. It was a gruesome sight that confirmed the rumors of sinister experiments conducted within these walls. Desperation drove the teens to find a way out. They raced through the shifting maze of corridors, pursued by the malevolent presence that seemed determined to keep them trapped. Just when they thought they were doomed, they stumbled upon a door leading to the rooftop. On the rooftop, under the pale light of the moon, the group made a horrifying discovery. Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa were not alone. A malevolent entity born from the hospital's dark history manifested before them. It was a grotesque amalgamation of tortured souls seeking revenge for the atrocities committed within Mercywood's walls. In a desperate bid to save themselves, the teenagers offered the journal they had found as a token of appeasement. The entity seemed to accept their offering and slowly dissipated into the night, leaving the 4 friends shaken and traumatized. As dawn broke and they emerged from the forsaken hospital, the teenagers knew they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. Mercywood Hospital held on to its secrets, but it had delivered a warning. Some mysteries were better left unsolved, and some places were better left abandoned. Years passed, but the memories of that harrowing night haunted them. The whispers, the apparitions, and the malevolent entity were etched into their souls, a reminder that some horrors were all too real. And so, Mercywood Hospital remained a dark and forbidding presence in the town of Mercyville, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead blurred, and where the past continued to cast its long shadow over the present. Years passed, and the teenagers grew into adults, but the memories of Mercywood Hospital refused to fade. They had tried to move on with their lives, but the weight of their shared secret bound them together. Nightmares plagued their sleep, and they would often wake up in a cold sweat, hearing whispers in the darkness. One day, a renowned paranormal investigator named Dr. Jonathan Black arrived in Mercyville. He had heard the rumors surrounding Mercywood Hospital and was drawn to the town by the lingering supernatural presence. Dr. Black was determined to uncover the truth behind the hospital's malevolent history. Dr. Black's investigation led him to Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa. Reluctantly, they agreed to accompany him back to the abandoned hospital, hoping to put an end to the nightmares that had plagued them for so long. They entered Mercywood once more, their hearts heavy with dread. As they ventured deeper into the decaying building, the malevolent presence that had tormented them before began to stir once more. The whispers returned, more insistent and menacing than ever. Dr. Black's equipment went haywire, and he struggled to maintain his composure. In the heart of the hospital, they encountered the entity once again. It had grown stronger, feeding on their fear and despair. Dr. Black attempted to communicate with the spirit, seeking to understand its torment and offer it release. The entity's story unfolded, revealing a tale of suffering and cruelty that dated back to the hospital's darkest days. It had been a patient, subjected to inhumane experiments in the name of science. Its anger and pain had festered over the years, binding it to Mercywood's cursed halls. Dr. Black, with the help of Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa, conducted a ritual to free the tormented spirit from its earthly shackles. It was a risky endeavor, fraught with danger, but they were determined to put an end to the malevolent presence once and for all. As the ritual reached its climax, the entity's form twisted and contorted, writhing in agony. With a deafening scream, it dissipated into a swirling vortex of darkness and light. The hospital trembled, and for a moment it seemed as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. When the dust settled, Mercywood Hospital was no longer haunted. The malevolent presence had been banished, and a sense of peace descended upon the forsaken building. Dr. Black, Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa had confronted their fears and put an end to the hospital's curse. With the haunting finally over, Mercyville could begin to heal. The town decided to demolish the decaying hospital, erasing its dark history from the physical world. The nightmares that had plagued the four friends began to fade, replaced by a sense of closure and redemption. As the sun set on Mercywood Hospital one last time, it marked the end of a chapter in the town's history. The secrets of the past were buried, and the town of Mercyville could finally rest in peace, knowing that the malevolent presence that had haunted them for so long was gone forever. Story 2: The Curse of Blackwood Mansion. Echoes of Despair. In the small, secluded town of Blackwood, nestled deep within the dark and mysterious woods of New England, an eerie fog rolled in every night like a shroud, concealing secrets that had haunted the town for generations. It was a place where whispers of strange occurrences were passed down from one generation to the next, and where the old-timers spoke of an ancient curse that hung over their heads like a pall. At the heart of Blackwood stood the foreboding mansion, an imposing structure that had long been abandoned by its former occupants. It was said that the mansion was cursed, and that those who entered its decrepit halls never returned. The townsfolk dared not even approach it, for they believed that malevolent spirits inhabited its darkened rooms. But one fateful night, curiosity got the better of a young man named Jacob. He had grown up hearing the chilling tales of the foreboding mansion, and he couldn't resist the lure of the unknown. Armed with nothing but a dim flashlight and a trembling resolve, he set out to unravel the secrets that shrouded the mansion. As Jacob approached the mansion, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping around him like an icy embrace. He hesitated at the imposing entrance, his heart pounding in his chest, but the thrill of the unknown pushed him forward. The front door creaked open with a spine-tingling groan, and he stepped into the darkness. Inside, the mansion was a maze of winding corridors, each one darker and more foreboding than the last. Jacob's flashlight barely pierced the gloom, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. He could hear faint whispers in the distance, like the murmurs of long-forgotten souls trapped within the mansion's walls. As he ventured deeper into the mansion, Jacob stumbled upon a grandiose library, its shelves lined with dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts. Among the books, one particular volume caught his attention. It was an ornate, leather-bound tome with a peculiar symbol etched onto its cover. With trembling hands, Jacob opened it, revealing pages filled with incantations and arcane rituals. Unbeknownst to Jacob, the book was a cursed grimoire, and as he leafed through its pages, he unwittingly unleashed a malevolent force that had been trapped within the mansion for centuries. The room grew colder, and the whispers around him grew louder, now forming sinister chants that echoed in his ears. Desperate to escape the encroaching darkness, Jacob fled the library, but the mansion seemed to shift and twist around him, its corridors rearranging themselves like a living, breathing entity. He was trapped, a helpless pawn in a nightmarish game. Hours turned into days, and Jacob's sanity began to fray. He encountered apparitions that tormented him with their haunting visages, and the mansion itself seemed to conspire against him, leading him further into its nightmarish depths. But just when Jacob had resigned himself to his grim fate, he stumbled upon a chamber unlike any other. In its center, a spectral figure awaited him, a woman with long, flowing hair and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. She spoke in a voice that was both ethereal and sorrowful. "You have released me from my eternal prison," the ghostly woman said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But in doing so, you have sealed your own fate." Jacob, trembling with fear, pleaded for his life, but the woman's gaze was unforgiving. She revealed the truth of the mansion's curse. The spirits within were bound by a powerful spell, and only by sacrificing a living soul could they be set free. As the realization washed over him, Jacob knew there was no escape. The mansion's walls closed in around him, and the malevolent spirits closed in for their macabre ritual. In the end, the whispers of Blackwood would tell of a young man who ventured into the foreboding mansion, never to return. And so the curse of the foreboding mansion endured, claiming yet another victim, and the fog that rolled in every night remained, concealing the dark secrets of Blackwood for generations to come. But the story doesn't end there, for the town of Blackwood carried its own secrets. As the years passed, whispers grew louder, and a new generation of curious souls ventured into the mansion. Each time, the curse claimed another victim, its malevolent force growing stronger with each sacrifice. Rumors of the cursed grimoire spread, and a group of intrepid investigators sought to break the curse once and for all. Armed with knowledge and determination, they combed through the mansion's hidden chambers, deciphering the dark rituals within the accursed book. In a climactic showdown, they confronted the vengeful spirit that had ensnared Jacob, and with a powerful incantation, they bound the malevolent force back into the grimoire, sealing it shut with a final desperate chant. The mansion, no longer plagued by the curse, began to crumble, its darkness receding like a defeated shadow. Blackwood was finally free from the haunting horrors that had plagued it for centuries. Yet, as the investigators left the town, they couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent force within the grimoire had not been vanquished entirely. They knew it was only a matter of time before the curse would seek a new vessel, a new victim to ensnare, and the cycle of horror would begin anew. And so, the town of Blackwood, once shrouded in fog and fear, remained forever haunted by the lingering spectre of its past, its secrets buried deep within the tangled woods, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its dark history. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. In the small town of Ashford, nestled amongst the dusty hills and dense forests of New England, there lived a woman named Eleanor. She was a reclusive figure, known for her eccentricities and a past shrouded in whispers. Her house, an ancient Victorian mansion, stood at the edge of town, its windows like watching eyes and its walls filled with secrets. Eleanor's days were spent in solitude, her only company the books that lined the shelves of her expansive library. She had an air of someone who had seen too much, yet yearned to know more. Her nights, however, were far from peaceful. For several weeks, Eleanor had been plagued by a recurring nightmare. A shadowy figure, faceless and silent, would appear at her bedroom window, staring in with an intensity that felt almost palpable. Each morning, she would wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of the dream lingering in her mind. She tried to dismiss it as just a figment of her imagination, a trick of the lonely nights. But the dream persisted, growing more vivid with each passing night. Determined to rid herself of these nocturnal visitations, Eleanor began researching the history of her home. She delved into old records and spoke in hushed tones with the town's eldest residents. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The mansion had been built by a man named Jonathan Ashford, the town's founder, in the late 1800s. Rumors had long swirled around Jonathan, tales of dark rituals and a forbidden knowledge he sought. It was said that he vanished mysteriously one night, leaving behind a home filled with strange symbols and writings. Eleanor's research led her to a hidden room in the mansion, behind a wall in the library. Inside, she found Jonathan's journal, its pages filled with frantic scribbles and unsettling drawings. The more she read, the more she realized that the shadow in her dreams was not just a figment of her imagination, but something much more sinister. As the line between reality and nightmare began to blur, Eleanor started to see the shadow during her waking hours. It was always there, just out of sight, lurking in the corners of her vision. She felt it watching her, waiting for something she could not comprehend. In a desperate attempt to confront her fear, Eleanor decided to stay awake one entire night, watching the window where the shadow appeared. As the hours ticked by, her eyes grew heavy and the room around her seemed to shift and change. Just as the clock struck 3, the darkest hour of the night, the shadow appeared. It was more distinct than ever before, a dark silhouette framed against the pale moonlight. Eleanor's heart raced as she stood to face it, her fear mingling with a strange sense of anticipation. The shadow seemed to beckon her, its presence both terrifying and mesmerizing. She approached the window, her breath fogging the glass, and then, with a suddenness that took her breath away, the shadow vanished. In its place was a scene from the past. A glimpse into the night, Jonathan Ashford disappeared. Eleanor watched, rooted to the spot as the scene unfolded. She saw Jonathan in his study, surrounded by ancient tomes and flickering candles. He was chanting something, his voice growing louder and more desperate. Then there was a flash of light, a scream, and darkness. When Eleanor came to, it was morning. The sun was shining, and the room was as it had always been, but something had changed. The oppressive feeling that had hung over the house was gone. The shadow did not appear in her dreams that night, nor any night thereafter. Eleanor never fully understood what she witnessed that night. Had she seen the true fate of Jonathan Ashford? Or had it been another dream, a final act of the nightmare that had haunted her? She continued to live in the mansion, her curiosity undimmed, but the shadow beyond the window remained a mystery, a dark chapter in the history of Ashford, forever unsolved. The days following the spectral vision were quiet, almost eerily so. Eleanor found herself wandering the halls of her mansion, pondering the enigma of the shadow and the vision of Jonathan Ashford. She could not shake the feeling that something remained unresolved, a piece of the puzzle still missing. She decided to delve deeper into the town's history, seeking out the oldest and most forgotten archives. In the dusty basement of the local library, she discovered old newspapers and diaries from the time of Ashford's disappearance. Through these, she learned about a woman named Abigail, rumored to have been Jonathan's lover and confidant. Abigail, it seemed, was a woman of mystery herself, known for her knowledge of herbal remedies and whispered to have dabbled in the occult. The townsfolk had treated her with a mix of fear and respect. Eleanor found a faded photograph of Abigail, her eyes seeming to hold a secret wisdom. Intrigued, Eleanor sought out Abigail's descendants. She found a great-grandniece, an elderly woman living on the outskirts of town. The woman, named Marianne, welcomed Eleanor into her home, a cottage filled with relics of the past. Marianne shared stories passed down through her family about Abigail and Jonathan. She spoke of a forbidden love and a pact made in the shadows, a pact that bound their fates together. Abigail, she said, had disappeared shortly after Jonathan, leaving behind a legacy shrouded in mystery. Eleanor returned to her mansion with more questions than answers. She felt a connection to Abigail, a sense of kinship that transcended time. She began to experience vivid dreams where she walked the halls of her mansion as Abigail, seeing the world through her eyes. In these dreams, Eleanor Abigail would meet with Jonathan in secret, their conversations filled with talk of other worlds and hidden truths. Eleanor could feel the love and desperation that had driven them, the sense of impending doom that hung over their relationship. One night, in the most vivid dream yet, Eleanor witnessed a ritual. Jonathan and Abigail were in the hidden room, surrounded by arcane symbols and flickering candlelight. They were attempting something dangerous, something that would break the barriers between worlds. Eleanor could feel the power surging around them, the air crackling with energy. Then something went wrong. A force, dark and uncontrollable, burst forth, engulfing the room. Eleanor could hear Abigail scream, filled with fear and regret. She woke up gasping for air, the remnants of the dream lingering like smoke. She knew then that what she had seen was more than just a dream. It was a memory, a fragment of a past long buried. Eleanor spent the following days in a daze, her mind occupied with the visions of Abigail and Jonathan. She felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that the story was not yet finished, that something was still waiting in the shadows. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder rolled over the hills, Eleanor was drawn once again to the hidden room. The air was thick with the scent of old books and forgotten secrets. She felt an invisible force guiding her, leading her to a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, she found a small box, its wood ancient and carved with symbols that seemed to move in the flickering candlelight. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a locket containing a strand of hair, dark and fine, like that of Abigail. As Eleanor held the locket, the room seemed to spin around her. She felt herself falling into the abyss of time, the boundaries between past and present blurring. Eleanor found herself standing in the hidden room, but it was different now, alive with the energy of the ritual. She saw Jonathan and Abigail, their voices rising in an incantation. She could feel the power building, a storm about to break. Then, with a sound like the world tearing apart, the ritual reached its climax. A portal opened, a gaping maw of darkness, and from it emerged the shadow. It was a creature of nightmare, formless and terrifying, its presence an affront to the natural order. Jonathan and Abigail tried to control it, but it was too powerful. It turned on them, its dark energy lashing out. Eleanor could only watch in horror as the shadow consumed them, their screams echoing in the void. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision ended. Eleanor was back in her own time, the hidden room silent and still. She understood now. The shadow was not just a figment of her dreams, but a remnant of that fateful night, a piece of darkness left behind when the portal was closed. Eleanor knew what she had to do. She had to close the loop, to end the legacy of Jonathan and Abigail. She began to study the ritual, poring over Jonathan's journal and the ancient tomes in her library. After weeks of preparation, she was ready. She set up the ritual in the hidden room, replicating the conditions of that night long ago. As she began the incantation, she could feel the shadow drawing nearer, attracted to the energy she was summoning. The air grew cold, and the candles flickered wildly. Eleanor continued the chant, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her heart. She could see the portal beginning to form, the darkness reaching out towards her. With a final surge of will, she completed the ritual. A blast of light filled the room, and the shadow screamed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then it was pulled back into the portal, disappearing into the void from which it had come. Exhausted, Eleanor collapsed to the floor. When she awoke, it was morning, the sun streaming through the windows. The oppressive feeling that had haunted the mansion was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. She knew that the story of Jonathan and Abigail was finally at an end. Their tragic tale, which had spanned centuries, had come to a close. Eleanor felt a sense of relief, but also of sadness. She had touched a part of history, had been part of a story much larger than herself. As she walked through the halls of her mansion, she felt a new connection to the past, a sense of understanding and acceptance. The shadow beyond the window was gone, but its memory would remain, a reminder of the thin veil between reality and the unknown. And so Eleanor's life continued, marked by a deeper appreciation for the mysteries that surround us all. She often thought of Jonathan and Abigail, of the love that had driven them to defy the boundaries of their world. She wondered what other secrets lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But that is a story for another time. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. In a small isolated town, nestled at the edge of a dense forest and often shrouded in a thick persistent fog, stood an old, abandoned mansion. Known as the Harrogate House, it loomed over the town like a forgotten sentinel, its windows blank and staring, its once grand facade now crumbling under the relentless march of time. The town's residents, a close-knit community of hard-working folk, rarely spoke of the Harrogate House, except in hushed tones and with furtive glances. It was as if the mere mention of the house could awaken something sinister. The mansion's history was marred by tragedy and strange occurrences, giving rise to countless rumors and legends. Some said it was haunted by the spirits of its former inhabitants, while others whispered of more malevolent forces at play. Among the townspeople, there was one who held a particular fascination with Harrogate House, a young writer named Thomas. Thomas had grown up hearing the tales of the mansion, each more intriguing and terrifying than the last. An avid writer of horror stories, he found the mystery of the Harrogate house irresistible. He often dreamed of exploring its decrepit halls, uncovering its secrets, and finding inspiration for his next novel. One chilly October evening, with the full moon casting an eerie glow over the town, Thomas made up his mind to visit the mansion. He equipped himself with a flashlight, a notebook, and a steely resolve. As he approached the imposing structure, the air grew colder and the fog seemed to thicken around him, as though the house itself was exhaling a ghostly breath. The front door of the mansion was ajar, hanging off its hinges, a silent invitation to enter. Thomas stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The interior of the house was a time capsule, filled with relics of a bygone era. Dust-covered furniture, faded portraits, and cobweb-laden chandeliers. He wandered through the ground floor, his footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The house was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each turn revealing more of its forgotten grandeur and decay. In the grand salon, a grand piano sat silent, its keys covered in dust. Thomas imagined the music that once filled the room, now replaced by the whispers of the past. As he ascended the grand staircase to the upper floors, the air grew heavier, and a sense of unease settled over him. The second floor was a maze of bedrooms and private chambers, each telling a story of the lives once lived within these walls. In one room, he found a child's nursery, toys scattered across the floor, as if the children had only just left. Continuing his exploration, Thomas discovered a library, its shelves still stocked with ancient tomes and manuscripts. A heavy leather-bound book caught his eye. It was a journal belonging to Edward Harrogate, the original owner of the house. The journal detailed Edward's life, his family, and the construction of the mansion. But as Thomas read on, the entries became darker, more cryptic. Edward wrote of strange dreams, unexplainable events, and a growing sense of dread. The last entry in the journal was the most disturbing. Edward described a ritual, an attempt to contact something beyond the veil. The entry ended abruptly, the final words smeared and illegible. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if Edward's fear had transcended time, reaching out from the pages. Determined to uncover more, Thomas ventured deeper into the mansion. In the attic, he found a room sealed off from the rest. The door was locked, but a sense of purpose drove him to force it open. Inside, he discovered a private study, the walls lined with strange symbols and arcane texts. At the center of the room stood a large mirror, its surface clouded with age. As Thomas approached the mirror, the air around him grew cold, and a sense of dread filled the room. He raised his flashlight to the mirror, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The reflection in the mirror was not his own. Instead, it showed the image of a man he recognized from the portraits in the house, Edward Harrogate. But this was no ordinary reflection. The eyes of Edward in the mirror were alive, filled with an unspeakable sadness and torment. Thomas stumbled back in horror, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. The reflection of Edward began to speak, his voice a hollow echo from the past. Edward's spirit revealed the truth behind the Harrogate house. The mansion was built upon an ancient site, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. Edward, driven by grief over the loss of his family, had sought to breach that veil, to bring them back. But his ritual had gone awry, unleashing something dark and malevolent into the house. The spirit of Edward implored Thomas to leave, to escape the mansion before it was too late. But Thomas, captivated by the story and his own insatiable curiosity, pressed Edward's spirit for more information. The spirit, bound to the house and tormented by his own actions, revealed that the malevolent force he had unleashed was a parasitic entity, feeding on the emotions and souls of those who entered the house. This revelation struck a chord of terror in Thomas's heart. He realized that his fascination with the Harrogate house was no accident. The entity within the house had been calling to him, luring him in with the promise of stories and secrets, just as it had lured others before him. Thomas turned to leave, but the room had changed. The door he had entered through was gone, replaced by a smooth, unbroken wall. The house, now alive with the malevolent spirit, was reshaping itself, trapping him inside. In a panic, Thomas searched for another way out, but each room led to another. Each corridor twisted back upon itself. As he wandered the endless halls, the house seemed to feed on his fear, the atmosphere growing more oppressive with each passing moment. Ghostly apparitions began to appear, spectral figures wandering the corridors, their faces twisted in anguish. Thomas realized these were the souls of those who had fallen victim to the house's curse. In a desperate bid for freedom, Thomas made his way to the mansion's tower, the highest point of the house. There, he found a window overlooking the town below. Without a moment's hesitation, he broke the glass and climbed onto the ledge. The ground was far below, but the fear of remaining in the house was greater than the fear of the fall. As he prepared to jump, Thomas heard a voice, soft and melodic, cutting through the oppressive atmosphere of the house. It was the voice of Elizabeth, Edward's wife, whose spirit had also been trapped within the mansion. She pleaded with Thomas not to give in to despair, to find another way to break the curse and free the trapped souls. Driven by a newfound purpose, Thomas climbed back inside. He returned to the study where Edward's spirit awaited. Together, they devised a plan to confront the malevolent entity and put an end to the curse. The confrontation was a battle of wills, Thomas and Edward's spirits against the dark force that had corrupted the Harrogate house. The entity, powerful and cunning, fought fiercely to maintain its hold on the house and its prisoners. But Thomas, bolstered by the spirits of Edward and Elizabeth, channeled his fear into determination. In the end, it was the power of their combined wills that turned the tide. The entity, weakened and unable to sustain itself without fear to feed on, was banished back to the void from which it had come. The house shuddered as if in pain, the walls cracking, the floors heaving. As the entity was expelled, the spirits of those trapped within the house were released. They ascended in a cascade of light, their faces now peaceful, freed from the torment they had endured. Edward and Elizabeth's spirits lingered for a moment, their eyes meeting Thomas's in a silent thank you before they too disappeared into the light. With the curse lifted, the Harrogate house began to collapse. Thomas raced through the disintegrating halls, dodging falling debris and crumbling walls. He reached the front door just as the house gave a final groan and collapsed in on itself, the dust and rubble settling where the mansion once stood. Thomas emerged from the wreckage, battered but alive. As he looked back at the ruins of the Harrogate house, he knew his life would never be the same. He had faced his fears, uncovered the truth, and in doing so, had freed the souls of the lost and ended the reign of the malevolent entity. In the days that followed, the town slowly began to change. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, the fog cleared, and for the first time in generations, the townsfolk felt a sense of peace. The legend of the Harrogate house lived on, but now as a tale of triumph over darkness, a story of a writer who dared to face the unknown and emerged a hero. Thomas continued to write, but his stories now carried a new depth, a reflection of his own journey and the truths he had uncovered in the ruins, of the Harrogate House. His experience had taught him that sometimes the greatest horrors are those we create ourselves, and the most powerful stories are those that reveal the light within the darkness. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. It's begun to snow again. Astrid, it's Michigan. It's going to snow. It's good to know, okay? I see nothing wrong with... I shushed her and began to just stare at them while the both of them continued to bicker in almost silent voices. They've been friends since their first semester here, which was probably a year or maybe more ago. I honestly can't remember at this point how long it's really been. Astrid and Lewis, knock it off. We are only here to study, nothing more. And definitely shouldn't be messing with each other in a damn library. Lewis waved his arms in the air and sighed. I get that, but look at this voluminous room. Then looked at me with a judgmental glare. As if letting me know that I am the problem, he continues. How could we not mess around? I can't even imagine anyone being able to actually study here. I get that they both want to mess around. Being in their early 20s, that is probably the only thing on their minds, but we have many other things that we could accomplish at this moment. Definitely anything instead of fighting in a library. I came to Michigan not long before the first day of the semester on a full scholarship, and I do believe so did Astrid. But Joseph, on the other hand, has lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan his whole life. The only reason he is even here is because of his stuck-in-their-ways parents, or at least what he says they are. His father went here years ago, and at one point, so did his father's dad as well, and so on. Lewis Wakefield is most certainly the most crass student in this library, and in general, at this college. Personally, I see nothing wrong with wanting to study for a midterm, but who am I to judge Tweedledee and Tweedledum? You know, no one else is even here. We have this whole place to ourselves. Lewis says this while puckering his lips in Astrid's direction. You never know what could happen behind closed doors. Astrid laughed and started to cough while doing so. There are many flaws in your plan. I like the fact that there are hundreds of small windows dispersed around, and the main flaw is that you are never getting anything from me. And with that, Lewis starts to walk around, turning left and right, seemingly trying to pretend nothing happened. His usually olive-toned face was becoming a creamy shade of burgundy. He is about 20 feet from us, pretending to read what looks to be an upside-down phone book at an orange wood-colored table. Of course, I walk towards him. He and Ash have been my closest friends since I moved here, and I don't plan to change that in any way. You do know that you have no chance with her, right? I smile wryly, hoping to soften the mood. Lewis puts down the phone book and shoves it back into its original slot. He chuckles. You say that now, but... He leans on a dusty book, which also looks to be a phone book, but of a much later date. It shifts and hits the back of the shelf with a thud. The bookshelf then started to move. There were clicking noises, and then the shelf made an unhooking sound. The left side swung open about an inch, while the right side was mounted in place. I gasped. What the hell? I stare in disbelief. What did you do, Lewis? Lewis looked at me as if I had 5 heads. I didn't do anything. Astrid cut him off. Lewis, what was that noise? She is still on the other side of the library, and the clicks and grinds echo through the giant room. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised that people outside of this room heard it, though I am surprised no one has come in to check to see what it was. Okay, why are you both blaming me? I haven't done anything. He goes on to say he never does anything wrong, and we always blame him. He starts to yell. I debate telling him not to yell at the library. Instead, I sigh and begin trying to push the shelf back into place. It won't move. Louis, get over here and help me. He says something under his breath and starts to walk towards me, going on the left side of me. He starts to push. Joe? It seems like there's a room back there. Curiosity got the best of me. I looked behind the shelf. There was indeed a room behind the apparently heavy shelf. It was smaller than a bedroom, but bigger than a closet, a contrast to the big, illuminated room we were already standing in. It was almost pitch black inside and had a trace of mildew. I don't know about you two, but I think we have an adventure awaiting. Astrid is now right next to us both. She hits the back of his head and says, "You can't even chew gum while walking. How are you going to go on an adventure? Stop talking nonsense and just try to close the shelf." Ash began to walk away. "Well, fine then. You can walk away, buzzkill. But Louis picks up the thickest book from the shelf and drops it on the table next to us, and another, until the shelf is almost completely bare and weightless. I'm going to start to explore. Astrid stopped walking and started to watch. I am also watching this unfold. Louis is known for being a little all over the place, but this is just weird. I might as well go along with it. Looks like we're going on an adventure. I tried to say this as enthusiastically as possible, but Astrid just nodded. Now that we are all in agreement, let's go. And with that, all three of us go into the unknown and shut the makeshift door behind us. It seems that it has gotten even darker. I wasn't even aware that was possible. Astrid takes out her phone and shines the light on the two of us, then starts to shine it on the rest of the room. It was even smaller now, a concrete brick that seemed to be engulfing us. The only thing that really seemed new was there now seemed to be a hallway leading from our room to who knows what. Can't believe this place is just inside of the college. Wonder what it's been used for, or if at all. Look, I gesture towards the hall. We have more to discover, we might find out. They both look at me with a slight bit of nervousness. I can't say I'm not nervous, so I understand it. But I still walk on, pushing Astrid to the front since she has the light in hand. And since I'm not going to be caught dead going first. We walk for about 3 minutes in silence. I feel Louis holding on to my collared shirt. This will probably wrinkle it sadly. The silence is killing me. Anytime a shoe scuffs or one of us breathes in a little too loudly, I can feel my heart completely stop beating. I'm not usually a scared person, but this is a little too much. I'm so focused on myself that I'm immune to my surroundings and can't even feel Louis attached to me anymore. We walk for a little longer and then come to a full stop. It's a dead end. What's the point of a long hallway if there's nothing at the end of it? Astrid looks behind herself at me and sighs. Then her eyes go wide. I look behind myself. Louis is no longer being me. Louis, Louis, Louis. I continued to scream his name, but he did not respond. Ash, let's just start walking back. He most likely chickened out and ran back. I say this more to calm my own nerves than hers, but I can see her hand shaking, moving the light slightly back and forth. Here, I'll hold the light. Stay behind me. We started to walk back, faster this time. My nerves have subsided. But then, I almost completely jump into the air, and Ash screams bloody murder. I turn back so fast that I've probably given myself whiplash. I flash the light. She's nowhere to be seen, though, not a trace. Her scream can be heard slowly traveling back down the hall. I can almost see her silhouette. At least I assume it's hers. At this point, I'm completely shaking. I can't even move one foot in front of the other without falling on myself. I kept one hand on the wall to stabilize myself and begin to run. The air pressure drops. My head starts to feel dizzy and everything is spinning. My hand starts to feel cold and almost wet. Without looking at the liquid, I whip it on my shirt and continue on, changing hands every now and then when the coldness becomes too much. After what seems like hours of running like a hamster on a wheel, I finally get back to the front room. Louis is indeed there, in a seemingly new chair, blood running down his shirt. I'd scream if I wasn't so shocked. I look down at my hands and shirt, which are also completely soaked in blood. I don't even care anymore. If I start trying to push the shelf, it won't budge. It's as heavy as it was earlier. I start to yell, "Help! Anybody, please, damn it, damn it, damn it!" Without thinking, I just started kicking the door. Astrid's phone drops out of my hand and completely shatters on the floor. The light goes out. Darkness. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. The rain was coming down in sheets as I fumbled with the front door key. Most people would never think of putting a deadbolt lock on an old cabin in the middle of the woods, but my father was not like most people. Mitchell, my 10-year-old that didn't want to make the long drive, stood next to me, an irritated traveler. "Dad, I'm getting soaked," Mitchell said, dripping. "Just a sec, buddy," I blurted from a wet mouth. A moment later, presto, the door was open. A strike of lightning illuminated the living room briefly, and I was able to grab the kerosene lamp hanging on a nail near the front door. As I struck a match and lit it, I could see the wisdom of renting the place out periodically. Cobwebs were only marginally evident, and the layer of dust on the table, chairs, and wood stove was only slightly thicker than a wrestler's neck. I threw Mitchell the matchbook and motioned for him to light the lantern on the far wall. I took my trusty Zippo and lit the lantern on the near wall, next to the door leading to the only other room in the place, a bedroom, with the only other exit to the place, a back door. "What are we doing way out here, Dad?" Mitchell asked, with that lilt in his voice I wasn't fond of hearing. "We're meeting somebody, Mitchell." "Out here? Who? Bigfoot?" "Look, Mitch, lose the attitude." "Dad, I'm wet, I'm cold, I'm probably going to miss my music lesson, and I'm allergic to dust. I'm sorry if I'm not a lot of fun to be around right now," Mitchell said, treading a thin line. "So, who are we here to see? And don't tell me one of your doctor friends. This isn't the Hyatt Regency. Somebody I haven't seen in a long time. Somebody I thought I'd never see again." "Sounds like you don't want to see him too much now," he said, looking at me quizzically. "Let's just say where Bryson Ambiel is concerned, it pays to be cautious." "Ambiel? Is he a relative?" asked Mitchell. We had left the door ajar when we entered, and now it began to swing open. Bryson, my twin brother, stood in the doorway, clad in a black leather jacket and jeans, and strangely wearing an oversized pair of dark sunglasses on this most overcast of afternoons that was fast becoming dusk. "Yeah," he said in answer to Mitchell's question, "the kind of relative they don't talk about. How goes it, Harlan?" "Always liked a dramatic entrance, didn't you, Bryson?" "They're the best kind, bro," he said as he closed the front door. It was then he noticed Mitchell. "Who's the munchkin? I told you to come alone." "Jesus, Dad, he looks just like you," Mitchell said, his anger fast turning into fascination. "Mitchell, this is your uncle, Bryson Ambile," I said, trying to sound positive. "Whoa, a twin. You never even said you had a brother." "I don't doubt that," said Bryson as he looked Mitchell up and down. "Mitchell, you named him after the old man. How typical." Bryson snorted as he began to light his cigarette. "Yes, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't smoke around him." "You smoke?" "Did. Keep a Zippo in my pocket as a reminder not to. I'd like to keep my fourth grader's lungs clean if you don't mind." "Anything you say, Harlan. Bryson said, as he snapped the top closed on a black lighter with a skull and crossbones on it. Although I didn't ask you to bring him. Since his mother died last year, where I go, he goes. How do you ever take a shower? Bryson responded. Besides, I thought he might like to meet his only living relative. If you can call this living, Bryson said under his breath, as he straddled one of the chairs next to the table. He began fiddling with the cigarette still in his mouth and noticed me watching him. Do you mind if I just let it dangle from my mouth? Pleased to meet you, Uncle Bryson, said Mitchell, offering his small right hand. Looks like you've trained him well enough, Bryson said, looking past Mitchell as though he wasn't there. But this isn't about your progeny. This is important. Oh, I'd say he's pretty important. Guess you've never been a father, I said, as I saw Mitchell awkwardly withdraw his outstretched hand and walk back to my side. I've never been a fire hydrant either, but that doesn't mean I don't know what it's like to get pissed on, Bryson shot back. Thoughts of our dad's volatile relationship with Bry swirled in my head. The time right here in this cabin when we had just turned 7 and Dad brought us up here for the first time to fish. Bry had gotten a hook stuck through his thumb. Dad made him pull it out himself without breaking off the tip. It left a scar. In so many ways. Look, Bry, I'm sorry you and Dad weren't close. But you brought it on yourself sometimes with that damn chicken shit attitude, I said, after the memory parade had calmed down a bit. Hey, no prob, Harley. Dad liked you. Mom liked you. Even the dog liked you best. Of course, I didn't give a shit about Mom and the old man, but I really liked that German shepherd, Bryson said. Not that I care, but where has Biker Boy been for so long? Mitchell chimed in. I don't know, Mitchell. Your Uncle Bryson disappeared fresh out of school. He was a genius in genetics research even back then. All his professors said so. Rumor had it he was recruited by the government. You mean this guy's a doctor? Like you? Mitchell said, disbelieving. Oh, he's a doctor all right, Mitch, but not like me. Yeah, my patients occasionally live, Bryson said, cutting me off. My dad's an oncologist, said Mitchell, seething. He helps people who have cancer and saves a lot of them. What do you do, big man, besides suck on cigarettes? Take it easy, Mitchell, I said, trying to restrain myself from hugging my newfound defender. Okay, Bryson, cut to the chase. Why here? Why now? After all these years? Why not Mom's funeral? Why not Dad's? You know why not Dad's, Bryson snarled. Okay, but even if you were still upset with them, Christ, I'm your brother. Why didn't you try to contact me before now? Then this afternoon, out of the blue. And you asked me to meet you way out here? What's the story? It's a long one. Mind if I smoke? Said Bryson. Yes! Mitchell and I barked in unison. Like father. Like son. Like asshole. Bryce said, putting away his lighter. But enough about you, Mitchell retorted. Cool it, Mitch, I said, trying to calm him down. Why should I? I've never met this guy before in my life, and after 5 minutes with him, I'm hoping he stays away for the rest of my life, Mitchell said. He seems to have inherited the old man's charm, too, Bryson said, smirking. It was like there had to be one bad son and one good one. And I was elected to be the bad one, the outsider, the screw-up. Well, after a while, Harley, you walk around with a tag like that, you begin to believe it. Man, and I thought I was feeling sorry for myself for making the trip out here. Mitchell piped up, still on attack mode. I take it the words discipline and respect aren't used often in your house. But I guess since Debbie bit the big one, it's been tough to keep the boy in line, eh? Bryson said. Don't you ever talk about my mother, Mitchell said, glaring at Bryson. Bryson took a long look at Mitchell, who facially resembled Deborah, but in the eyes and hair color, he was us at that age, and Bry could see it. You know, I can believe a lot of things about you, Bryson. I can believe you've been working underground for Uncle Sam all these years. I can believe you hated your family so much you didn't even bother to tell them if you were alive or dead your entire adult life. But I can't really believe you contacted me after 13 years, had me drive out to meet you so far out in the woods the coyotes avoided, just to open up old wounds, I said, wanting to get to the bottom of this. No, not old wounds. Send the boy away and I'll explain it to you. And where is he supposed to send me? Summer camp? Mitchell said, reminding me of his uncle more and more. Mitchell, go wait in the car, I said. But Dad, Mitchell motioned for me to lean down next to him. Dad, he's a space case. I don't think I should leave you alone with him, he whispered. My mind went to the small caliber handgun I had tucked away in an ankle holster, a bit of insurance against my own brother's warped nature. I'll be okay. Just wait in the car, so we can get this over and done with, I whispered back. Okay, but be careful, he whispered to me. At least there's a heater in there, Mitchell said loudly, as though now wanting to go to the car. Bryson must have noticed the sarcastic similarities between he and my son as well, because, though I couldn't see his eyes behind those mirrored lenses, he followed Mitchell's movements all the way out the door. He opened his mouth as though he wanted to say something to Mitchell, but as the door closed, he simply turned away and crushed the cigarette he had just taken from his mouth, then checked his watch. Okay, we're alone. What kind of trouble are you in? I said. Is that the only reason you think I'd call? Am I wrong? No, not at all. You always were the one to bail me out, since before we were Mitchell's age, he said, then looked at his scarred thumb. It hurts, Daddy. It really hurts, he said in a faraway voice. Then he looked at me. You always tried to help at least. Always managed to keep your coattails clean, though. Only this time, I got us both in trouble. What do you mean, Bry? Shadow Lake, Kentucky. A genetics research facility there. That's where I've been the last 10 years. Experimenting with a gene splicing technique for military application. Trying to create the ultimate soldier. Bryson said soberly. You mean genetically crossing animals? No, bro, humans. Government-sanctioned mutations. You see, no matter how intelligent an animal is, it needs the human element to be an effective assassin. I listened as Bryson laid his cards out on the table. The history of the Shadow Lake Project, as it had come to be called. How they first experimented with terminally ill prisoners in exchange for posthumous payments to their families on the outside. But no matter how they altered them, how strong, how fast, how deadly they made them, they would all eventually succumb to the disease that was killing them. But I wasn't ready for what he said next. That's when my superiors got greedy. You see, in order for the experiment to keep its funding, they had to have some evidence of the long-term effect of the mutation. So, they started using healthy lifers, or death row inmates. When I heard about it, I suggested they subject all potential recipients to a psyche screening first, to weed out the absolute wackos, Bryson said, seemingly pained to recall it. And did they? I asked. Hell no. To be honest, Harley, how many habitual offenders and death row inmates do you think could have passed? So, we had the dregs of the Kentucky prison system lined up to become the most powerful creatures on earth. And we gave them that power, never thinking. He stopped short, then said again, never thinking. He then poured out a tale that would make Mary Shelley turn over in her grave, of men who looked normal but were endowed with unbelievable strength, speed, eyesight, hearing, or tenacity. Then he spoke of the failures, beings just as powerful as the others, but horribly disfigured by the treatment. Monstrous man-beasts that would sometimes go mad at their lack of humanity, or was it the researchers that were lacking in that? He spoke of a revolt by these hybrids, which had taken to calling themselves the Shadow Men. So, they took over the facility, killed most of my colleagues, except for Marienthal, and few other key players, like me, he said, chewing on his knuckles like he used to when we were kids and we were in trouble. Who's Marienthal? I asked. Project director. They keep him alive to keep reporting in to our liaison. They took over 2 months ago, and the powers that be haven't got a clue that anything's wrong up there. I saw a chance to escape last week, and I took it. Been on the run ever since, dodging them and trying to find you. Why? And if they're as deadly as you say they are, how did you manage to get out of there without a scratch? I asked. Just lucky, I guess, he said, as he took off his sunglasses to reveal a gnarled left eye. From the condition of the wound, I'd say it was about a week old. Let me take a look at that. Damn it, Harlan, don't you get it? He said, cutting me off and not allowing me to examine what was left of his eye. We instilled in every hybrid a tracking sense. They track by genetic code. It was supposed to keep them from eliminating the wrong target in the field, but it never worked right. They always had problems with similar genetic codes, like those found in close family or... He stopped short and looked at me. Twins, I finished for him. Is that how I'm involved in this sick nightmare, Bry? There are shadow men all over the country now, some that can blend in, some that can't. They're targeting me now that I've escaped. Figured I at least owed you a warning, bro, Bryson said. I looked into his gray-blue eyes, just like mine, just like Mitchell's, and I knew, as insane as it sounded, what he had just recounted to me was the truth. All except this last part. This altruistic trek across the country to warn me wasn't in his nature 13 years ago, and I had my doubts that this experience had changed him for the better. I watched him as he moved across the room to the door, leading to the bedroom, and leaned against the wall in his usual cocksure manner that I remembered all too well from our days growing up. Nerves had given way to something else. But what? This is bullshit, Bryson. You wouldn't cross the street to give me a warning, much less cross the country. You say the shadow men are all over different parts of the country, but the odds of them looking for you and finding me were remote. That is, unless they were after you, and you came here, led them right to me. So, what are you really doing here, Bryson? I said, already knowing the answer. Surviving, bro, surviving, he said, checking his watch again, as though he had someplace else to be. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I wanted to kill him, but I needed answers first. How close were they to him now? Did they have any weaknesses? Could local authorities be of any help if they could be made to believe this story? Then the lightning flashed outside, and I remembered the son I had waiting in the car. The son I had done my best to ignore at the time of his greatest pain when he lost his mother. The son who at that moment walked in through the door. "Mitchell!" I cried as I saw his wavering, bloodied body stagger towards me. "Dad," he said weakly, as he dropped like a stone in the middle of the floor, beginning to shake involuntarily. "It hurts, Dad. It really hurts." His clothes were slashed, like he'd been attacked by a tiger. He was bleeding from his ears, nose, and mouth. I knew he had severe cranial trauma, and as he began to convulse, and those gray-blue eyes rolled backwards, one thought filled my mind, all-encompassing and all-consuming. "Bryson!" I screamed, not knowing that he had already slipped out the back door and away from the danger. My brother was gone just like my son, as I watched his blue-gray eyes roll back and he breathed one last time. I looked up to see the silhouette of a misshapen creature as it stood in the doorway, my boy's blood still dripping from its teeth. "Good evening, Dr. Ambile," it said in a deep, guttural voice. I drew my gun and fired before it could lunge. Every bullet in every chamber found its mark, felling the creature. Thus began my pursuit, fueled by my hatred. The shadow men wouldn't kill Brizon. I would. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories.